Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of How to Get into Investment Banking. This is episode 5B or episode 6. And oh wait, wow guys, sorry. This is actually episode 7. I got a little thrown off there because episode 5 was cut into two pieces, so there was episode 5. They got cut into episode 5 and then episode 6. So welcome to episode 7. Wow, 7 weeks in. But today's episode is really, really big. In today's episode, I will be talking about something that I believe all students need to do that I feel like a lot of students don't do, and not nearly as enough as they should, because this situation, quote unquote, of getting in investment banking is an ongoing and evolving um, thing, right? It's a breathing thing, right? Your situation changes from when you're a senior in high school to a freshman, sophomore, junior in college, and so forth. And it's about analyzing your situation, how to approach that, and why that's so important. Because as you guys see on the screen right here, you know your career is going to be impacted by so many variables, and unfortunately, a lot of times these are going to be variables that are out of your control, and that's really really unfortunate. But what we can do is control how we are in that environment, and what type of positioning we put ourselves in. So even there are external factors, market timing, market conditions, firm hiring, not hiring, what school you go to, etc. Just make sure you're positioned, in the best possible way. So regardless of what's going on around you, you can still perform optimally to the extent um, that you can, right? So that's why it's really really big, to to think about. Hey, let's start analyzing my situation. Let me start thinking about what I'm doing. So, if you don't do this, I can promise you right now, most students, whether you're at a target or a non-target, everyone analyzes their situation, right? The students who perform really well, the students that I coach with, students that get into banking, they all, effectively are analyzing their situation one way or another. And listen, the cost of not doing this is it's gonna be tremendous. You will not get into banking if you don't do this. I want to be very clear about that. And the problem is that students are so busy trying to getting into investment banking that they don't take a step back and to think about whether or not they have positioned themselves correctly to do so. So oftentimes you're not going to be in an ideal situation, and I'll touch on this in a little bit. You won't be in an ideal situation, so it doesn't make sense to maneuver in a certain way or make certain moves that might make sense if you were otherwise in a better situation than you are currently. And that's why, one thing that you need to do right now is to understand your situation, analyze it critically and objectively, and then once you've figured out kind of where you stand in the ecosystem relative to your peers at your school, kind of a broader peer set, then it makes sense. Hey, let's go through some of these pain points that you're going through, and depending on what situation you're in, how do we tackle them one by one? So what I'm going to do in this episode is, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some pain points that students face, just overall, like a hierarchy theme, and then how you can avoid them on your journey into banking, and then make sure that, hey, you actually land opportunities, offers, and kind of set your career up for the long run. So let's dive in, right? So again, the pain that students face, that it comes from, guys, is not being in an ideal situation. And what does that mean, right? So an ideal situation, let me go back to this page. An ideal situation can mean that, hey, maybe you're at a non-target versus a target, right? And then even in the world of non-targets, there's semi-targets, and then there's like complete non-targets, right? So if you go to, like, no offense, if you go to like Kane University, all nothing but love for Kane. I'm from Jersey, but if you go to Kane University is the very definition of like a complete non-target. So if you go to, like, for example, Rutgers is a non-target to an extent. Rutgers is even a semi-target, I'd say, at this point. But if you're going to move differently if you go to Kane University versus if you go to Rutgers, right? Because you're just going to have to maneuver differently, right? There's going to be different things you have to do to get into investment banking, right? So that's one thing. A pain comes from, hey, I'm not in an ideal situation, and there are going to be different things that are holding you back, right? Again, you might even still be at accounting college right now. Your GPA might be holding you back. Lack of on-campus recruiting, a lack of perceived opportunities, and this is a key word here, and I'll talk to this later. but again, a lack of perceived opportunities. And these are the frustrations that are there for students. And it's really painful because you don't know what to do. It's like, hey, I got into college. I went to college. I went to 4-year school. I want to work in banking, but I have these roadblocks, right? And the issue is that you're not being put in an environment to succeed. And I know this is way harder than it sounds to do. And in all my videos, I definitely clarify that is that, hey, regardless of the situation you find yourself in, it's possible, right? But in order to take a few steps forward, you got to take a few steps back. And in this case, it's analyzing your situation. So you have to take a step back, figure out how you fit into this ecosystem, and then move forward. But the problem is, this is the biggest problem, is most students don't even realize that this is a thing. They don't realize that not understanding where they stand is even a problem, right? And then they fail to realize that the problem they're facing is one that they can really, really easily address. So look, if you don't know where you stand, what your environment is, and this is what's going to impact your day to day, right? So again, you don't know where you stand, you don't know what your environment, what your ecosystem is. You can't possibly expect to maneuver in a way that's going to position you to land your dream front office role. Further, not understanding where you stand will leave you with blind spots, and that's what you don't want. So the first thing that students really have to come to grips with, and I'll give some anecdotes to kind of help digest all of this, but the biggest thing is, like I just mentioned briefly, is like, what school do you go to, right? Are you at a super target, like a Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Wharton? Are you at a semi-target, maybe Boston College, Rutgers, Penn State, USC, UCLA? Some people might say those are targets too, but again, there's like super targets, semi-targets, and then are you at a complete non-target, right? Are you at a county college? Are you at a complete random state school? This matters because your ecosystems are going to determine how you maneuver and what moves you make. The other thing is, you go from, let me just go here. Oops. All right. So it's school. The second thing is your GPA. And what is your GPA? Another crucial thing to monitor and to be mindful of from day one is, what's your GPA, right? Often students try to get cute and take fancy classes, and I have nothing against that, but please wait to take hard classes until you're a senior or you have an offer locked up full time, because why are you wasting your time taking hard classes? And I don't want to hear it about you need to learn shit to do well in interviews. You can learn more than enough on your own between guides and actually learning concepts on your own. Like there's a difference between doing that and taking like the hardest accounting, hardest valuation class and taking 6 classes a semester, right? I'm not saying go take basket weaving like Matt Leinart did his 5th year at USC, but again, there is a balance. And the problem is that oftentimes, even if you're taking a double major, these prereqs can and will mess you up. So you want to not get cute around that and be mindful of that. Another thing, and I'm going to start numbering these out because there's a huge laundry list, right? Is your timing of graduation and your age. And the reason this is important is because this matters, because if you're serious on getting the front office role after graduation, then your age matters. Again, highly dependent situationally. But, did you transfer from a county college? If so, did you plan on staying an extra year? Sometimes I do encourage this. Or are you staying an extra year anyway because you're double major, or maybe, not all your credits transferred over? The other thing to be mindful of is your on-campus recruiting situation. So what does this mean, right? It's like, what's on the job board, like even for like starter internships that you can take to build your resume, right? They're what I like to call stepping stone internships. And oftentimes students who want to take front office roles are really ambitious. They tend to overlook these. But again, this is also something that you should be monitoring, which is, hey, what is my on-campus situation to even begin with, right? Let me actually see what's available to me. And while you might be at a semi-target or non-target and you might not see front office job postings, which is fine, there are going to be other finance internships that you can take that you should absolutely take to build your resume. And it's just more so than building your resume, right? It's just obvious, there's obviously the soft and hard skills that you will develop, but more importantly, it's building that resume of like actual work experience, right? And then how you spin that and bankify that experience. Something that a lot of students don't do is to look at like, actual recruiting trends, right? You know, ergo 3-year trends. And wow, that I don't know what I just spelt there, guys. Is to look at actual 3-year recruiting trends, right? Like, is anyone at a firm that you actually want to work at? These are the hard questions that are going to usually give you answers that you don't like. So what this means is it's like, hey, who from my school has gone to a firm that I'd like to work at out of undergrad? Has anyone done it? Right? No. Okay, well maybe I'll be the first. If not, hey, there's some firm that might will take you, but it might not be the firm you want to work at, right? And remember, that's why I stress the whole PPD, the why long term, because you could get in somewhere and then always lateral to your dream firm, right? So there's no need to panic just yet. And there should be no need to panic as long as you kind of do this heavy lifting ahead of time. So again, what are the 3-year recruiting trends, right? Because you have to see, hey, would have been summer internship placements, would have been for sophomores, juniors, freshman programs, where have seniors gotten in after graduation, meaning let's say you're a senior starting your senior year with no job offer, no junior year banking experience. So you have to do the research into the data, and the data set is your peers from the past, and you need to do that homework to find out like, hey, what have students that are in my situation at the same school that I'm at, where have they gone, how have they gone there, what are the numbers, what have been the class sizes, and then that'll give you a really, really good idea of like, hey, I have high chances of getting into these regional boutiques, some of these bulge brackets. Maybe you have a certain presence in a strong group. There's a stronger presence in a certain group because a lot of banks, they might obviously have their target schools, but some groups might be dominated by a certain school, and they make sure to recruit folks from their school. Meaning you might have like an associate, VP, MD in one group, and they're going to try to always push to get like a one summer analyst, from their school or something like that. So that's really important too. The next thing that a lot of students don't think about, and they should more often, and this is not talked about anywhere, and it really bothers me, is your financial situation. And what does this mean, right? This is very simply, can you afford to work for free? Can you afford to work for free at a wealth management or regional boutique, or can you afford to take a loan out to go work at said regional boutique, right? Or are you in a position where you have to take some sort of mid-office finance internship? So think of like a FP&A, or like strategy, treasury, operations, some sort of corporate, quote unquote, corporate finance type function during the semester or the summer to make money, because listen, everyone's life and stuff is different, but maybe some people need to do that. So then you could take a free internship during the semester. I have a lot of students that I've worked with where it's been a tough situation where it's like, hey, I need the money for a variety of reasons, and it's like, hey, I have this kind of like mid-office finance opportunity at some company working in strategy or ops or whatever, and it's a paid internship, and it's like, hey, like, you're staying an extra year, you haven't found any front office gigs, let's take this paid internship this summer, save your money, handle what you have to handle, and then in the fall, and obviously in the summer you prep for this, so that way in the fall you can work for free at a regional boutique or some sort of front office role, whether it's at a buy-side shop doing research, whether it's working wealth management or whatever, just something that will allow you to work for free to build that resume that's more kind of bankified experience. And I hate this, right? But it's the reality of the world. It's like, I feel like we penalize, I say we, I mean, banking, recruiting, like students get penalized, for working a job that wasn't banking. It's like, yes, I know I didn't work in banking, but it's because they didn't come to my school and I needed to work a job that paid me money, right? And I feel like students get, penalized because they didn't. It's like, hey, God forbid I needed to make money to pay for school and shit, right? Not all of us, went to Andover, Phillips Exeter, and had our parents pay for everything. I had to work to pay myself to go to college, right? And that's not shade on anyone else. It's just more shade on, again, like I said, it's an unfortunate reality that we live in where perception drives everything, right? So, but again, that financial situation is really, really important to think about. And I'll do a video on my situation of when I decided to take a loan out and go live in Boston for 3 months and do that. The next point, guys, is your body of work. And I sort of covered this in kind of prior episodes, but body of work really means the following, right? Is a combination of your major, your GPA, extracurriculars, so club sports, any student clubs, like your banking club, your technology club, entrepreneur club, whatever, case studies, any actual internships, and this is something that will really dictate how you need to move and what you do day to day, because a lot of students have really terrible body of works, and it's surprising. And that's why I say it's not just important to take easy classes and spread your classes out so you can have like a higher GPA and spend the bulk of your time networking, developing your networking with that slow burn, because sometimes it is like a 1 to 2 year slow burn, developing your behavior technical skill set, and then also making sure you have a good GPA. But it's also so you can, be social on campus, and not just being social for the sake of being social. It's so you can actually partake in things, and be a part of case studies and competitions and things like that, right? So I'm going to stop right there quickly, but these are all things, and this is kind of like, this is the baseline, guys. This is the baseline that you need to do, that we need to address. When I'm working with someone, this is the stuff that we need to address before we even start to dig into, what type of roles are you thinking about long term, what type of firms that you're interested in. Because doing this type of analysis, what it establishes is a baseline, like I've written here, and this is a very important baseline for us to work off of and build off of, right? So I'm going to just draw this here. My very rudimentary drawing, excuse this. And for everyone who's listening, obviously I'm going to upload, these PDFs online, and obviously make sure to download them. So this is actually a terrible drawing. So let me just make it a little prettier. And wow. Okay. So we know this very important baseline for us allows us to build off of it, right? So let's say at a very base level, I'm going to put, this is kind of like the high water mark. This is kind of like, I guess the baseline is the floor, but this is like worst case, right? Right. So the baseline is, and I'm just kind of going off the dome, but I'll kind of get centered again in a little bit. But you have to understand is, okay, hey, where's your school? Where does your school rank? Where does your GPA rank? What's your body of work? Your age, your time to graduation, and kind of a lot of things that I touched on earlier. But when you kind of figure these out, then you can be like, all right, shit, where do I stand? Am I hitting this high water mark, or am I kind of below? Like, it's really kind of like, hey, where are you relative to the average, right? That's all this is. This is to analyze, where do I stand relative to my competition? Because once you understand where you rank, where your school ranks, how you stack against your closest regional competitors, what firms are going where, class sizes for summer analysts, full-time recruiting, how competitive you are against your peers based on your GPA, how far are you from graduation, it's going to allow you to look at yourself objectively and then make the right decisions to get into investment banking. And look, I'm against ranking schools, but I think that's a reality that exists. Other people rank and view schools through a certain lens. For example, I went to Rutgers University. It's a great school, but we are in that fabled Northeast corridor. That Northeast corridor is rough. There is a lot of competition that exists in terms of recruiting and how hard we have to fight for recognition, right? I mean, forget the Ivies, right? Princeton, Columbia, Harvard, other targets like MIT, Boston College, BU, NYU. There's so many others, Fordham, the SUNY schools. And then even if we go a little further down, you got William and Mary, you got Darden or UVA, you got Georgetown, right? So look, the reality is that I'm against ranking schools, but other people aren't. And that is a reality that exists, is to understand, all right, well, based on where my school ranks, where my peers are going to rank, when I'm interviewing or networking with someone, you have to assume that they're getting hit up by students from all these schools. So you could be networking with the analyst in one group or MD in one group, whatever. They're going to have 10 resumes in front of them from all these schools. And the reality is that MD probably went to the school that wasn't your school, but one of the students that reached out to them did go to their school. And that's going to create an interesting dynamic, because you are now being compared, and you're going to have things that are going to be weighted against you, right? You didn't go to their school. You're not a target. So that's why it's important to understand that where do you stand relative to your peers, and how that's going to impact how you're seen by recruiters and people you're reaching out to. So look, in theory, this is like, I could sit here and say I'm against ranking schools, but guess what? It does matter. And don't hate the messenger. I'm just acknowledging this reality for students to accept, because you have to play with what you're dealt with. Apple Watch. Anyway, uh, this is a game that these are the cards you've been dealt with, and you have to deal with it. So the reality is that you have to be nimble, and once you accept where you are, then you can move fast, and then you can be assured of like, okay, this is my background, this is my GPA, this is how much time I have left to graduation. How do I then maneuver to get into banking, right? And that's the most important thing is, right, is once you come to this realization of excuse me, I'm trying to pull something up, guys, that is not um, you know, so that's something for you guys to understand, right, is like, hey, where do I stand once I've done this analysis, right? And let's say, you're at a non-target, you have a 3.5, you have no on-campus recruiting, and I know this sounds a very doomsday scenario-ish, but maybe because it is, a lot of students are in this bucket. If you understand, most of you watching this video will fall in this bucket of like non-target, good GPA, relatively speaking, but you have no on-campus recruiting. You might have like mediocre body of work. You might have a very weak alumni presence. And then you're like, shit, what do I do from here, right? What's my game plan, right? And analyzing your situation can be very somber, but once you accept the realities of your situation, then you can decide what to do. Then you could be like, all right, cool. Do I go an extra year? Right? Cool. Do I go an extra year? Do I transfer to a target school, right, by staying an extra year, right? Hey, do I drop classes? What can I do, right? So that's extremely critical, is to do this first and foremost. So look, one thing that I want everyone to do to listen to this episode is in the next episode, what I'm going to do, and the first thing that I get the homework for this week is, as much as it hurts, is really think through that environment that I've talked about, and really kind of create your own profile. Is like, hey, where do I rank in my school right now? Do the homework to see where have students historically placed on. So let me just make this easier for you guys. I don't want to. Let me just make a new slide. Let me just delete this, and just to give you guys. All right. All right. So what I want everyone to do for next week's episode, or before next week's episode, right? First and foremost is you should know yourself well enough, but the biggest things are what have been the 3-year placements trends, right? Just kind of see across everything, right? Undergrad, grad, freshman, sophomore, junior programs, whatever, and then even look at other programs. So even if you're not eligible for like a SCO or an MLT, but those students still came from your school into those programs, still kind of look into this, just because, hey, you might not be eligible to get in these programs, but students from your school are, and now they're at these firms and in these roles, right? So that's still relevant because they're still alumni, right? So look at placement rates. That's the biggest thing that I want you to do. And then I want you to be really objective. The biggest thing to handle before we even get to GPA and all that is look at your time and age and kind of your path to graduation, because this is going to really impact, which is kind of important, which is like 2A, which is like, hey, excuse me, hey, do I stay an extra year, right? Do I stay an extra year? Do I transfer? What do I do? But you need to understand the parameters of this, right? Which is like your time to graduation, your age, and then you could finagle and kind of figure out what makes sense for you. And then the last thing to do before you can figure this stuff out is like, hey, what's your body of work, right? And this encompasses everything, like actual work, club, school experience, GPA, I already wrote work, right? So, and then kind of once you have this aligned, you could be like, all right, well, hey, look, we've had X amount of students go to, bank 1. We had, Y students go to bank 2, and so forth. And then you can see what groups they're in, whatever, but that's really important. And then if some of these folks are still at your school, if it was a freshman in a freshman program, sophomore in a sophomore program, junior in a traditional program, or a senior who just got an offer, go and talk to them and be like, hey, who are the most important alumni? What's that presence out there? Learn and understand this stuff. And look, you have to understand that everyone does this. Even I did this, right? I got to know all the seniors, all the juniors, the folks who weren't in LIBOR, which is our banking club, folks who were not in it, right? And hey, how did you get in, right? Who did you reach out to? Who were alumni that were helpful? How did you handle the hurdles? Who else do you know who's out there? And then you can start forming your own picture of like, hey, who from my school exists in this universe? So this is really, really important. Please do this. This is the homework assignment. And then that way, when you come up to next week's episode, guys, next week, I'm going to dive into this in detail of how I would handle this, right? And to kind of literally walk you through like, hey, what would I do first? You know, talk, like I said, school, your OCR, your body of work, alumni situation, financial situation, and then timing of graduation, and kind of how I would tackle this. And I'll kind of use a case study of a student that I've worked with, my own case study. So that way you guys can understand like, all right, well, how do I tackle this? And then how do I kind of figure out where I stand? And again, look, this is going to be an imperative skill set for you, because this is not only going to help you in the short term, but will also help you in the long run when you're actually in the industry and trying to lateral and trying to go to buy-side opportunities. Because you have to understand, you might think you're the center of your own universe, but you're not. There are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of other people like you. And it's really important to take the time to step back and be like, hey, who am I in this world and what are my stats? It's like being a player in 2K. You're going to have a rating. You're either a 99 and you're LeBron and Curry or KD, or you're like an 85 and you're a Richard Jefferson or something like that. No offense, shout out to Richard Jefferson, huge Nets fan. But you have to understand what your rating is, because based on that rating, you're going to be attracting different firms and groups accordingly, right? Just the way it is, right? Some people are going to attract the higher, certain mega funds and certain groups. And then so that way, doing this really essentially allows you to realize what ecosystem can you play in, at least for the time being. Remember, you can always improve, lateral, etc. But for the time being, your most important thing is to get into banking, right? And in order to do that, you need to understand where you stand objectively. So look, guys, I'm going to stop there with episode 7. I really think it's going to be a huge episode for a lot of people to kind of get humbled in a good way, understand where they stand, what their stats are. And then when we come back to this next week, and I'll go through the exercise of using myself as an example and a student that I worked with, then you guys will be like, all right, given where I stand and kind of what my rating is, now I know, hey, who do I need to target based on my long-term interests? What short-term interests do I need to make today that are actually going to be realistic, right? Like I said, you don't want to go and try to email David Solomon, because that's not going to do anything, right? What are realistic moves you can take, right? But again, guys, this is a long burn. I know this is hard work and it's tough to hear this, but you're not going to hear it anywhere else. So look, take the time to understand who you are, understand yourself, and then you'll be able to move better with purpose, process, discipline, guys, right? So anyway, I'm so glad that we're here. I know this is a lot of work, but guys, please, I know this is overwhelming, but look, watch this episode again. Reach out to me with any questions. You guys can text me. You can email me. You can drop a comment. I'm everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. I will respond to anyone and everyone who has any questions. And look, if you guys found this helpful and you think there's another student or classmate that might find it helpful, please do forward it to them, and then make sure you subscribe so you can get these PDFs each week, before the episode drops, so y'all can keep up. But anyway, with that being said, guys, this is Sajin Doshi signing off of episode 7. I think I got that right. But yeah, I will talk to you guys later and see you guys next week, episode 8.